Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our fantastic program today. I'm Maggie Newman, and it is my privilege and honor, truly, to introduce Paul McGehee, one of our local artists who's internationally known, actually. He was born in, let's say, 1960. And we're privileged, went to Yorktown, and I guess Anita Scott was his teacher over at Williamsburg, and I think Shirley Bishop's son went to school with Paul. And as it turned out, when we were chatting beforehand, his wonderful mother, Gay, his father was a dentist, my father was a dentist, and they were in the same dental fraternity. So even though my mother's in New Orleans, she said, McGehee, I know that name McGehee, but it's not spelled like it's spelled like McGehee. My mother's 88. And she said, but I think I know his father, you know, which is sort of typical of my mother. And then Gay said, you know, the Monroe, M-U-N-R-O, that's an unusual spelling. I may know your father. So it's a large neighborhood that we have here. And we're delighted to have his sister, Linda, and her husband, Richard, as well as mention of Anita and Alan. Am I right? Jim, okay, Jill, okay. Jim, whatever. I've never been that good with names. All right. I did want to mention a couple of other things. Anita Scott was sharing with me before that she wrote in Paul's yearbook that one day. It wasn't about the fact that he didn't inhale, okay, but it was about the fact that she said one day I hope to see your name in lights. And when I was reading his bio here, he talks about luminism, and I think you'll see that the quality, the light coming in to all of his paintings, which is so exquisite. And one of the things that I was just enthralled when I went to his gallery, the Old Town Gallery on Fairfax Street, and going through it on a Sunday afternoon is truly an adventure in time, in Arlington and in Old Town and Georgetown and throughout the many historical places. Paul, as you may have read if you looked at his website, which is also exceptional, I might add, and just seeing that the paintings flowing through was beautiful. And the fact that he does so much research on the historical background of each place is certainly a tribute. I paint myself, and it's certainly something I need to do a lot more of. In his downtime, if there ever is any, because he just finished this magnificent painting of the Arlington house, and it's just brilliant, as you can see, and again, the light coming in. But he does like to sail on the Chesapeake for his rest and relaxation with his wonderful wife, Lois, who's roaming around somewhere, and his son Cameron, who's 7 years old, and so that's just magnificent. So many credits to his honor, including in 1994 he was asked by the American Egg Council to create an original painting on the egg that would represent Washington, D.C. in an easier exhibit at the White House, and this was, I guess, during the Clinton administration. And so that was beautiful, and he was also honored by twice being chosen by Ducks Unlimited as Artist of the Year by the Potomac Valley chapter. So, you know, just so many things. You can read on and on. Presidents, he's in the collections for Reagan, Cal Ripken, one of my personal favorites, and many others, museums all over. So it is with my great honor that I present to you Paul McGehee.
Thank you very much. I wonder, as I see everyone in here, it's such a beautiful day outside, why are we all in here? We should be outside playing. Anyway, thank you so much for having me here. It's quite an honor. I am an Arlington boy. I've been here since 1960. I've seen a lot of changes. My family, my parents, my father was a longtime Arlington dentist, Dr. Raymond McGehee. My mother is seated right there. She was his assistant and encouragement for me in my early years. And I say that with a capital E because that's what it takes to be an artist, is encouragement. I have a theory that children innately have a way to communicate before spoken language. They communicate with music, they communicate graphically, they draw on the walls or something. And they have this, inborn way to communicate. And little by little, as people grow up, it seems to get trained away from a lot of them. And others, I think it is encouraged and nurtured, and I believe that's what happened to me. So I've taken the gift and run with it, and I am, well into a professional career as an artist. I went into this starting 1978 professionally when I graduated from Yorktown High School. But anyway, going way back, I was born in Arlington Hospital, November 2nd, 1960. And I went through James Madison Elementary School. I see my teacher, Catherine Nice, in the back row there. And very, very nice to see some familiar faces from my earlier days. Again, through the school years, most of my teachers saw that I would embellish on the edge of the homework pages and whatever, and most of them would encourage it. So it all just kind of built to the point where I was the class artist and a little bit of the class clown too, but that's another story. But through the school years, taking art classes and working on the school newspaper. I drew a lot of cartoons for the school paper, for the Century, Yorktown High School's paper. And I just can't say enough about all the people around me who through the years gave me a pat on the back and said that was nice, and made me want to draw something else. So, I always knew that I wanted to do this as a career. I believe from the get-go. My father, the dentist, he painted as a hobby. And each of the 6 children that my parents had, my father at some point, like on the weekends when he would do his painting, he would also get the kids to paint and come up with a painting or two every now and then. And every one of us in the McGehee family, they have a certain level of artistic ability and in different directions, but I went the professional route. I like to say I was a kamikaze. I had the choice given to me upon graduating from high school to go to college for art or start a business and see if I could make a go of it as a business. And I took the kamikaze route, and it proved to be a good move and very rewarding to me over these 34 years now. I have a love of history, as you can tell in my paintings. I enjoy researching pieces, finding all of the little scattered bits of information about an actual scene, and then breathing life back into it in a painting. It's like being an art detective. That's what I like to say. I'm an art detective. So I find all these little bits and go, aha, that's what that should have looked like, and then I can paint it. Some of these paintings I will research upwards of a year or more before I even pick up a brush. So I overlap my projects, and it's an interesting niche I've carved out for myself. I didn't know I was going to go precisely this path in the art career. At one time I thought I was going to be a cartoonist. I also still dabble in that world. I was thinking over the past few weeks as to what I would say in this talk. And the whole driving force behind what I do and why I do it. And I think at the heart of it, I'm a storyteller. And I've always had some kind of urge to tell a story, either writing stories or in graphic form in a comic strip, or in what are termed narrative paintings, which are what I do for a living. I tell a story through a painting. If one bothers to dig into the guts of what I paint, there's an actual scene, there are actual dramas going on. There's one over there of Glen Echo Amusement Park back in the 1950s, which some of you may recall, and had some good times there, and just things like that. I sometimes interview people who lived through it and find little things from their memories that I can incorporate into a painting. And it's been 30-some years of doing this. I'm, I guess, a bit of an historian myself at this point, if not historical, at this point. Let's see if I can read my own notes. One of the downsides of being in this business so long. Before I got out of high school or even thought of the career, I had a one-man show, believe it or not, at an art store on Glebe Road called Hill's Art Store. And this was in 1974. I had coverage in the Washington Post about this. Probably the last time I've been written up in the Washington Post. So, anyway, I had a presentation there, and really I think that's what gave me the kick to go on and do this as a career. But I was 13 at the time, so I had a ways to go. I mentioned that at one time I wanted to be a cartoonist, and also I had interests in getting into radio. I had interests in getting into filmmaking. So all of the above: storytelling, communication, the world of painting was something that I knew from age 4. I had been painting constantly since age 4. I still have in my studio a painting of a lighthouse that I did, and on the back my father had written summer 1965. So I would have been 4 years old. It was an oil painting of Portland Head Lighthouse in Maine, done from a picture in a magazine. So ever since then, he kind of kept my nose in it, and there was always a new image or a new stack of fruit on the tabletop to draw. And that's really my training. I am pretty much self-taught. I did take a brief course at the Corcoran Institute in Washington in the 1980s. They had live models, and I wanted to get a better feel for doing people, incorporating people into my paintings. My teacher, you might have heard of, the late Gene Davis of the Washington colorists. What a guy to have it for a teacher. The figure studies were not really his forte, but he was a great teacher, a very nice man. I'll never forget the day he turned the class over to me for one day, and he just left. He stepped out and said, "Paul, you can do this." So anyway, a very interesting fellow. I went through the high school years building up a portfolio of images, mainly oil paintings, entering art shows, and getting a certain level of acclaim, as best you can when you're 15. And then I graduated from Yorktown High School and immediately just went into it as a profession. I had enough paintings under my belt that I could make some prints of. And I started touring around, going to trade shows up and down the East Coast, one-man show appearances. One of my first shows right out of high school was an appearance, a group show at the World Trade Center up in New York. And that was like immediate immersion into the professional art world. So I was surrounded by all the luminaries of maritime art. And it just, anyway, it's been an interesting road. I started publishing art prints in 1979. To date, I couldn't even count for this presentation. I think I have upwards of 150 or more different images in print now, both of my oil paintings and pencil drawings and such. I have done numerous one-man show appearances at various galleries, and after doing that for a few years, you start thinking, well, we should have our own gallery. So in 1981, it started as a display in my father's waiting room at 704 North Glebe Road, and it sprang from a mixture of my pieces hanging alongside of his, and then my pieces kind of took over, and then they spilled over into the next couple of offices adjacent. Next thing I knew, there was a sign out front that said Paul McGehee Gallery. So that was 30 years ago. So we had a shop in Arlington across from Arlington. That dates me right there. Ballston Common Mall. The gallery overlooked the big picture window side of the Hecht Company with the interchangeable signage that they used to have. And Putt was off to the left. And anyway, so that gallery was there from 1981 till I think we had to move because of a road project in '95. And then since '96 to date, we have a beautiful shop in Old Town Alexandria, right across from City Hall. And our buddy Jim Allen is one of the associates there at the shop. And it's been great having a home base with family and friends all these years in the gallery atmosphere. And I just can't say enough to all the people that patronize us and have followed my work for all this time. I occasionally get tapped on the shoulder for various special little projects, which are plums when they come along. I've been asked to produce artwork for presidents and different functions over in Washington. I was asked by the Secret Service to come up with a birthday present for President Reagan one year. And so I painted a small scene of Pennsylvania Avenue as it appeared in 1911, the year of his birth. And it was presented to him by the Secret Service. I never got to meet him, but I did get a very, very nice letter back from him acknowledging the gift. And through the years, Maggie mentioned the Easter egg roll for the Clinton White House, and it's hard to paint on an egg. That was quite a challenge. But anyway, supposedly that egg is in the Smithsonian now somewhere. They kept the whole display case of state eggs, and there is mine representing DC. have my works in various collections of varied folks such as Ted Turner, Robert Goulet, the late Robert Goulet had a piece of mine. Cal Ripken was mentioned. It's an amazing career that it's, somebody at the easel can create something that touches so many people. And I've gotten to meet so many fascinating people through that as well. I have another concept of my career I was trying to think as I was piecing this together. That I started out as a child prodigy, was treated as such, which can be a big yoke around your neck as you get older. So I have had to reinvent myself a few times. My wife Lois in the back there has helped me reinvent myself a few times. It's just been, a bit of a challenge to keep this going for so many years, and I fully intend to keep it going. I consider myself at the halfway point at 51. Every day is a surprise in this business. There's no guaranteed, paycheck or anything. It's all, as my father used to say, it all boils down to what you do at the easel. So every time I'm staring at a big blank board, I try to bat one out of the park. So as you can see, I'm surrounded by a small display of my artwork. I've most recently had a project to recreate the Arlington House Mansion. That's the mansion otherwise known as Custis Lee Mansion that now overlooks Arlington Cemetery. But I portray it on what was to be Robert E. Lee's last day of living there. It was April of 1861, and that is Lee in the foreground there. And when you come up to see this close up, you'll notice that he doesn't look like the Robert E. Lee in the picture books with the gray beard and such. He looks more like Edgar Allan Poe. From all accounts that I have read and the photos from that era, he looked like that until assuming command of the Southern forces. And from what I read, within 6 months, the stress of the battlefield had aged him to the point where his family did not recognize him in newspaper accounts. So here he is. He has just made a very fateful decision. He resigned his commission with the United States Army and turned in his uniform, and what I show there is the Sunday after, and he and one of his daughters were headed to Christ Church in Old Town Alexandria for Sunday services. And the following morning he was on a train to Richmond, and as fate would have it, he never returned. The war commenced, and the Union eventually took control of the mansion. There are an interesting series of letters between Lee and his wife. He is saying, please hurry up and pack up all of the Washington memorabilia. For her side of the family, the Custis family, was of the George Washington family lineage. So the building, which was truly a monument to George Washington, contained a lot of memorabilia which had to be crated up and protected before anything were to happen to it. Anyway, just an example of the dramas behind these scenes. I research, I find stories, I try to hint at the story in the image, but not hit you over the head with it. I am also fully aware with a lot of these paintings that somebody purchasing one of my prints is just trying to match a sofa. And that's fine. That's fine. When they walk into the gallery with a swatch of cloth, I'm not insulted. But there is more to these than meets the eye. Let's see. The Glen Echo Amusement Park piece that was a true labor of love. I did that last year. 1954, I took the information from aerial photography from that year that was done and verified what rides would have been in operation. And it's just a typical summer's day with a picnic going on and the roller coaster in the background that a lot of you may remember actually riding. Glen Echo is now part of the National Park Service, and they have frequent concerts and dances out there. It's a great place. It still lives. It was originally started as a Chautauqua. It was part of the Chautauqua circuit. They were encouraging the learned heads of all various professions to come there and speak and put on exhibits and whatever. And that idea flew for a couple of years, and then they needed to make some money. So they started putting rides up, and it became an amusement park. Over here, this one on loan is a scene of Great Falls of the Potomac River. That was done from life. I do all of these from life, but the ones that go back in time a bit, I have to see what remains, look at the lighting situation, and then I need to research and kind of build what used to be back up again. But in the case of Great Falls, it's all happily intact and not, covered in construction and all that. So I could do a nice, almost Albert Bierstadt type treatment of the falls. This is the point of the falls that the river got its name from, by the way. The European settlers that first arrived, they heard the local Indians talking about Patawomac, and that was their word for the place of roaring waters, where the local tribes would all meet, and that was their gathering place. And it just ended up on the first maps in various spellings of Patawomac and then shortened to Potomac. But it's because of the noise kicked up by the falls, the Indians attributed that to the spirits talking, and they felt it was a friendly place to meet, and that's why we have the Potomac River now. This one here behind me, Old Baltimore at Twilight, is a 1934 scene of the Inner Harbor of Baltimore, and my how it's changed. And the steamer there, one of the big, beautiful passenger steamers back in the day that used to go back and forth to Norfolk, that one was the President Warfield, which for about 14 years had a happy career on the bay, just going back and forth. But then when World War II came along, she and a lot of her other sister vessels were commandeered by the Warshipping Administration, planked over, taken across the North Atlantic, these shallow draft boats, dodging U-boats. It ended up over in England. It was one of the vessels used in training in preparation for the D-Day invasion. After World War II, she came back over the Atlantic, was in Baltimore Harbor, and was pretty much slated to be scrapped when a fellow came along and purchased it for not much. He turned out to be fronting for Haganah, the Jewish underground. They needed a vessel in the Mediterranean to ferry several, like 2,000 some European Jews that had been displaced by the Nazis. They were trying to start the new state of Israel. They took this boat, the old President Warfield, renamed it Exodus. And this was the vessel that made that journey across the Mediterranean off the shores of Palestine, almost made it before the British ships intercepted her. But anyway, very, very famous ship, and I show it back in the day before all of that happened. Before Leon Uris wrote his novel, and before the Paul Newman movie showed the wrong kind of ship. Anyway, it should have looked like that one. But again, there's a story, there's an intrigue to this that you don't immediately pick up upon. It's just a happy scene at Baltimore Harbor if you don't know the details behind it. This is one that I gave more of the modern day treatment, just painting from life down at the docks, city dock of Annapolis, Maryland, and just showing the interesting lighting situation as the sun has set, but there's afterglow left in the sky. It's one of the most intriguing lighting situations and difficult to paint because you're fishing around between the world of day and night, and to get it all to come off without looking overblown is a challenge for me. So I like to challenge myself. So here it is, twilight time in Annapolis. Nantucket, the entrance to the harbor there, back in the early 1900s. Next to it is one I call Chesapeake Bay Harbor. It's actually a scene on the Wacomico River over on the eastern shore of Maryland, back in the 1880s. And those steamboats were the main lifeline for the people that lived on the shore. There were no bridges back then, no trucking industry or anything for the farmers to get their produce to market. They really depended on these steamboats that left Baltimore Harbor in the early morning hours, came across the bay. They would stop at all these little nondescript docks out in the countryside on the eastern shore. And the farmers would be waiting there with produce, sacks of potatoes and crates with clucking chickens, and they were all headed back to the markets in Baltimore. And the ships would also carry passengers as well, so I can just imagine the sound and the smell, but it was, must have had a certain level of romance to it. A lot of these I paint, and I try as much as I can to visualize myself there in the situation in a different time, and to pull off that illusion is my real kick in these. Sometimes I'll be 5 inches away from the board painting, and all of a sudden it will look three-dimensional to me, and I'll feel like I'm actually standing in another place, in another time, and then I know I'm on the right track. A few others down the line there. On the floor there is a duck hunting scene on the Choptank River over on the eastern shore back in the 1920s. Even for a hunting scene, I wanted to go back in time a bit because that's really my interest. I used to paint a lot of wildlife scenes along with my historical scenes. It's kind of trailed off a bit in recent years. I might revisit it. But I've painted scenes with foxes and deer, and there's one somewhere I brought with me of a little chipmunk. Yes, that's an Arlington chipmunk, by the way. And, well, I don't know about that. It's Alvin. No, he appeared in our backyard in Arlington when I was still living at my parents' house, and my father and I saw this little baby chipmunk out there, and he wasn't running away. He was fearless. He was just so young and pretty, and my father started photographing him, and I started sketching, and next thing I knew, I had this painting a few weeks later. But just little serendipitous happenings sometimes turn into paintings. I notice from our travels, my wife Lois and I like to travel a bit, and oftentimes what we see ends up becoming a painting. and if it's good enough, it becomes a print, and add it to my line. I'm always looking around and observing, and I think I have a bit of a photographic memory. I can memorize colors when it comes to lighting and whatever. Don't get me on people's names, however. My memory doesn't extend it. I try my best. But really, I'm very graphically minded, and I can look at a sunset and go back home and hit those same colors when I mix my oil paints. Let's see, all the way down at the end there is a scene of Heidelberg, Germany, which I painted while in high school, on the heels of a couple family trips to Germany and Austria, and coming back with all these great visions of the half-timbered buildings and towers with clocks in them. And this was Heidelberg, one of the beautiful old cities that was pretty much preserved through World War II, which most of them were not. Heidelberg was one of the ones spared. And I actually painted that as a project in high school for German class. My teacher, Louise Hall, Frau Hall, was very happy that I painted that and opted out of some written assignment. And I did that a lot in school. If I could do something graphic instead of, But anyway, you can see on the barge in the river there that the name of the barge is Frau Hall. So she got a kick out of that. Let's see if I can. Years ago, I made a presentation to the Arlington County Public Schools of several of my prints. They're still hanging in a lot of the schools. Our son Cameron is 7, and he currently goes to Jamestown, and there are Daddy's pictures there in the office. So, it's really an honor, to have been around this long and see things like that happen. One of the biggest kicks to me in recent years, though, speaking in the education field, 2 of my images have been used on the covers of school history textbooks for the Maryland public school system and the Delaware public school system. 2 of my images are on the 4th grade history textbook, which to me is like getting the Congressional Medal of Honor, because that's where it all started for me. We're reading history books, not only in school, but at home. I was surrounded by a great stack of books. The home library had all sorts of books on the 1920s and World War II, and I just devoured all of it. I don't know where this interest stemmed from, other than being surrounded with it in a home environment. I don't know. As a kid, I used to really like movies that were set in a different time period. Pirate movies, gangster movies. I never missed The Untouchables. I mean, all of that just kind of sank in on a certain level as a love of a different time. And here I am painting scenes like this, and it's been a great career, and I'm not going to look in the rearview mirror at it too much, because I've got a lot of painting to do, and I'm like I say, into my 52nd year now, and I am currently at work on a waterfront of Old Town Alexandria scene. And that should be finished, I hope, sometime in the early summer. And we continue to have exhibits at the gallery for not only my works, but other artists. And it's become quite a little community built up around something that started with me, drawing a stack of pears on a table when I'm 5 years old back in my house in Arlington. So I'm just very happy that I've been able, it's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of being in the right place at the right time, surrounded by the right people, and I appreciate it. So, anything else I should touch upon? Oh, probably the most national notoriety I achieved was in 2005. The phone rings one day, and there's this fellow who was with the Pageant of Peace organization that puts together the lighting of the National Christmas tree every year on the Ellipse over in Washington. And I was asked to be their official artist that year, so I said yes, not knowing what I was getting into. And I, at that time, was halfway through a painting of Mount Vernon, and I had to totally switch gears and come up with something showing the National Christmas tree. So for one of the few times in my career, I've literally had to paint two paintings at once. I never try to overlap projects, but it became a really, really fun experience. The painting was used on the cover for the show program for the lighting ceremony that evening. The night before, there was a gathering of all the performers that were going to be on stage after the tree lighting, the singers and the Ricky Skaggs and his family and the poet Maya Angelou, and we were all having dinner together the night before the tree lighting, so it was very much fun. And the following night, lighting ceremony, concert, and then everybody went to the White House and we got to visit with the President and First Lady. So I got written up in the U.S. News and World Report, and anyway, that was one of my 15 minutes of fame, and I loved every minute of it. The future will hold, I hope, more of the same. I paint about 2 major projects a year. I usually put them into print, and am always researching future projects. I say that as I research one, I get ideas for 10 more. So it just builds and builds. And I've got a list, and I know I'll not get to all of them before I'm 157 years old. I will do my best, though. But it all goes back to being a storyteller, and I'm glad that there are people around who want to listen. And I mentioned the cartooning career, and it's something that I have always pecked away at when I was a child, and then through the school years. Then, as the serious art career took off, I kind of pushed it aside for a while. I've recently revisited the cartooning career. I intend to have an exhibit soon of some of the comics at the gallery. And I have a little friend here, a character that I created when I was 10 years old. This is the Green Weenie. And he's my little character that appears in a lot of the comics. And I brought a small print here. I've put some of these more recent ones into print. This one's called Modern Tarzan, and he's swinging through the jungle on his vine, but he's got the little phone in his ear and the iPhone in his hand. He's modern Tarzan, or Tarzan of the apps. Anyway, I have a lot of fun with the cartooning. It's instant, and it makes people smile, and I would love to be able to do both, to continue with the serious and the not so serious, because, I'm basically a big kid. And I will just continue to do more of the same and tell my stories. If anyone has any questions, I will be happy to field them.
Could you walk us through from your concept to the print?
From the concept to the print, it begins usually as reading or overhearing someone tell a story about what happened at a certain place. and I start reading and researching. And boy, do I love the internet, because it has really sped things up, and it's been a great research tool for me. I can instantly find what I'm looking for. I still have books and photos and maps and all that, but it all just comes together in assisting me in getting what it is I'm supposed to paint. I then work it out as a pencil drawing. I do all my detail work as a pencil drawing. I have the colors in mind from visiting the actual spot, and I basically paint over top of a big pencil drawing. And it will take upwards of anywhere from 3 months to 6 months or more, depending on the subject. And then when the print is in production, it's a process of lithography. It's a very precise scanning. It's all, with computers now. It can be all, translated into digital color information and producing a very, very true final print. When I first started making prints back 30 years ago, the computers were not involved. It was dipping film, changing the yellow hue in a certain set of film, and it was like getting dressed in the dark. You never knew what you were going to end up with. So it was a lot more difficult to get to your final result than it is now. Anyway, the prints I have made fairly locally, a place in Cheverly, Maryland called Peak Printers. And it's a family-run operation. They've been around for years, and they've done the majority of my prints. And we print an edition of 2,000 pieces. I sign a number of them and take them to market.
You put a limit on the number of prints?
Yes, they are numbered, limited editions. I've done several that were editions of 950 and several that were editions of 2,000. So.
Would you have put the Arlington painting in print?
Yes, that is a print. As of this past summer, it's available now in print, and it's a very nice looking print too. I just didn't bring one with me. I just wanted to, show what one of my originals looks like.
I'm really intrigued by the fact that you studied Gene Davis being more different than where you are. And so I'm sort of curious about what you took away from him. And then sort of a second question is, if you ever think about if you had gone to art school, why you might be different if you fit in with a different world of art.
What I took away from Gene Davis was, number one, again, he was a very nice man. He wanted me to bring my prints in one day and show the class, which I, for somebody as well renowned as he, I was quite taken aback. So I brought some in one day, and he patiently sat through my little presentation, and everybody was, polite. And so he takes me aside and says, "Well, Paul, they're basically snapshots, but you've got a really good handle on color." So from the king of the colorist school, being told I had a really good handle on color, that was a medal. So, and if I had gone to art school, I don't know the answer to that one. It's such an unknown. I just have always worked at it from graduating from high school, and I don't know what an art school would have done to augment or reroute me. So.
Every day.
I am either painting, drawing, working on orders for the prints, doing something with the gallery. It's 7 days a week work, right, Lois? It's actually about 12 days a week work, and you know, the further we go, the behinder we get. But anyway, it's fun. It's fun. Oh, front row, right? You're so patient.
I'm interested in the original.
Uh-huh.
Do you sell them?
Yes.
Keep them, or how many you keep? And do you have any interesting stories about your originals? Where they went?
Ooh, well, yes, they are for sale. Once I get the print made, they're up for grabs, and I usually display them at our gallery in Old Town Alexandria. Some of the originals, they've sold to a variety of people and corporate people. They're in the lobbies of, like, the AM Best company that rates insurance firms. They have one of mine hanging in their lobby. I'm blanking out right now. Anyway, lots of long-standing collectors that are original customers. One of which, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, a fellow and his wife who had collected my prints for years contacted me for a group purchase of my originals and a lot of prints for a new hospital building being constructed in Salisbury, Maryland. It was the single largest event of my career to date, and this beautiful hospital building that these people were so nice to think of me to hang my work there. It's like a McGehee museum, and you know, I hope it's an outpatient building, so I guess all the people that see them are on their way out, and they're happy. But it's near Ocean City, Maryland, and I've done a lot of paintings of Ocean City and the beach in days gone by. So a lot of that artwork is there. Over here.
Do you ever paint anything as a request by anyone?
I occasionally take commissions. I have been lucky so far that most of these have been my own interests and my own projects, but I do listen to commission ideas. If it's something that intrigues me, I'll go for it.
I had in mind Jupiter Lighthouse.
Well, let me think. Okay.
Typically, artists are good business people. Were you your business manager, or was somebody else? How did you promote yourself from the beginning?
Oh dear. Well, it's been a joint effort, hasn't it, Mom? Yeah, my parents in the early years, going to all of these trade show appearances and packing up an old station wagon and going down the highway with a whole booth's worth of art, going to Cherry Hill, New Jersey for a trade show, and just things like that. And then the business aspect of it, lots of everyday book work on top of the creating art things. It's all part of the same soup. So it all has to be done. My wife Lois in the back there is doing everything that makes the business run, and doing it very well. And as I joke, that she does everything and I draw and paint, and I appreciate all the people that have helped me through the years in that regard. I was not blessed by the math fairy when I was young. I will admit that. But on another side of that, people have seen me show up at an art show and I'd be the only guy in a suit and tie, and another artist said that you're half artist, half Harvard Business School graduate. So I took it as a compliment. Anyway.
Can you tell me, do you have cards about the location of your gallery? Is it open daily, or do you have it by appointment?
We are open every day but Monday, and on the table towards the back are a stack of cards showing a scene of Atlanta, Georgia that I painted, and that has the gallery address and the website on there. But we are open every day but Monday. Oops, over here. Sorry.
A more personal question. You mentioned your son,
Yes.
7 years old. Has he absorbed any of your interest in history or your talent as an artist?
Ooh, well, he gets it from all sides. My wife was into art history as well in her college years, and quite the photographer. My wife Lois is good at very artistic photography, and also for years worked at the Supreme Court as a photographer there. And so Cameron gets genes from all sides, I'm afraid. He is graphically really good. He draws, he paints. He also is very musical. He is quite the rock drummer, and he plays keyboards, and he plays baseball. He's a Cub Scout, and anyway, gosh. He's a great kid. But yeah, he is artistically inclined in many ways. Someone, yes?
I know that in some of your paintings, for instance, the one of Ocean City,
Mm-hmm.
that has all the people on the beach, that you sometimes paint a face of someone near and dear to you. Can you tell us about the cheerleader and the football player and the left-hand side?
Well, seated at the table over there, and you can see it better after this little talk, are a young couple on a date to Glen Echo, and they're chatting about something or other, something that is making the young lady very giddy or something. Anyway, it's our friends Jim and Anita Allen, who assisted me on the research for that piece by providing me with some period yearbooks of, you know, how the kids dressed in 1954, and I do believe that the two of you went on a few dates there. It is. Okay. And rode the roller coaster, I hear. Okay. And Jim rode the roller coaster. And yes, the longest prayer he's ever said. And you used to have dark hair, right? It was a legendary wooden roller coaster that a lot of people say was quite rickety, and I never got to ride it, but I will say painting it was a challenge.
There are a couple of other people in that painting.
Oh, yes, in the front middle, a couple at the picnic table is my wife Lois and son Cameron, but you know, as they would have appeared many years ago. But yeah, sometimes I'll do that just to keep my own level of interest in a painting. I'll put people in that I know. So.
Yes. Has your medium always been oil, and also has your style changed at all over the years?
Has my medium always been oil, and has my style changed? I've always enjoyed oil. I've been using it pretty much since I was about 12. I tried acrylics. I tried some watercolors, but oil is agreeable to the pace at which I work, which is slow and methodic, and if it doesn't look right, I can just scrape off the oil, whereas on watercolor, you're doomed. It's in the paper, you're stuck with it. Acrylics, they kind of bothered me in that they dry a darker color than what you mix up. So I would make a nice blue sky, and then the next day I would look at it and it was like a dingy blue sky. So you would have to catch yourself and mix everything a shade lighter than what you wanted it. So I ended up using acrylics more for doing plastic model kits. than I did for paintings. And I built many of those when I was a kid too. And as my style changed, I like to think that it changes every time I paint something, because I'm not trying to keep within a certain range. I'm always trying to push myself out of a certain range. And I guess that's on the level of my cartoons. I'm trying to do it on that level too. I'm trying to just keep my brain doing something new and different, and I'm always, rooted in the world of realism and representationalism in my paintings. But I'm always trying different things with light and color. And for example, the Glen Echo piece, which came out a year ago, probably some of the most vivid colors I've ever used. And it all has to work, and it's a little scary at first, but then, since it's an amusement park, you can get away with it. Anyone else?